don't relationships always work out? I mean, there's some obvious answers to that, but what are the real reasons, and how can you avoid these so that when you get into a relationship, you give it the best possible chance of actually lasting long term? I'm going to look at the 3 top causes for why relationships don't work out, what causes them to break up, and how you can avoid them. So stay tuned. Hello to those of you who are joining. So I was thinking about this, and there's like 3 main causes that always contribute towards relationships breaking up. And they're actually quite easily avoided if you know about them and if you can consciously choose to work on them in your life and be aware of them as you go into relationships. So I want to speak about those today. And if you've got any questions whilst you're watching, please do ask. So the first one is something that I work a lot with my clients is settling for less than you truly deserve. Now, this tends to happen when maybe we're in a bit of pain and we're looking to find a relationship to just sort of like fix the pain of the last one. Or this can happen when we don't truly feel worthy of having exactly what we want. Or if we're telling ourselves stories that the type of partner that we want to get into a relationship with doesn't truly exist. What happens is we get into a relationship with somebody who's a fairly good match, like maybe 50% match, 60% match, maybe even like 70% match. And you're feeling like, this is probably the best I can get. This is probably as good as it gets. So let me settle. Let me put up with what's here. And I'm going to talk more about why that's problematic in a moment. The second main reason for why relationships tend to break up is you get into a relationship with somebody who you think is fantastic. And there's probably a little bit of you thinking, how did I get this person? Like, they're a little bit above my level and I better impress them. I better put my best side forward. And in this scenario, you end up not being your true self. You end up trying to sort of people please and bend over backwards to try and become what you think that person wants you to be. And I'll talk more about why that doesn't work out in a moment as well. And then the third reason why relationships typically don't work out is the big one that everybody talks about and everybody knows about, and yet it's so damn complicated and so intricate, and there's so much work you could potentially be doing towards it that it's pretty much like a lifetime's work, and that is communication. Lack of communicating. And this is what I actually see in long-term couples that have been together 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, when those relationships break down, because those relationships that actually managed to get that far, they probably weren't settling, and they probably weren't pretending to be a different version of themselves in the middle, because those two things just aren't sustainable long term. Those relationships will probably break down within the first 5 to 10 years, if not much sooner. But the relationships that go 10 years, 12 years, 15, 20, 30, long term, marriage, lifetimes, why do they break down? I've really been thinking about this because there's been some people in my world who are in this place. My parents' relationship broke down when they were 25 years in. I've seen loved ones break down at 30 years in. Other couples break down around similar sort of times. And there's obviously a really good degree of compatibility in these relationships because they lasted that long, right? So whatever they're doing was working, but something wasn't working. And over time, that thing that wasn't working eventually became bigger and bigger and bigger and eventually broke. Now, what this sometimes looks like is people lying and cheating, having affairs, or people just getting to the point where they just can't tolerate it anymore and having what sometimes called like a midlife crisis, or just getting to the point where you're like, I just can't do this anymore. And I wanted to speak a bit to like, why does this happen and how can you avoid it? And I know a lot of my followers are single and thinking this long-term 20 years, 30 years, even 10 years is, that's not where you're at. But bear with me, because even though I'm going to be talking, and it's not for the whole of this duration, but even though I'm momentarily talking about these longer term relationships, it is really relevant to you as a single person as well, because these same things will come up in your relationship, even if it's in the first few months, the first 18 months, the first 2 or 5 years, whatever. What you learn here today in this live stream is actually going to serve you to make a strong relationship when you find your partner. And if you really want support finding a partner, then DM me, because that's my specialty. But let me talk about this. So what's so key in relationships is being your true self. And actually this applies to all 3 things that I've spoken about. So let me just recap in case you're just joining here. Number 1, settling, not truly going for the standard of partner that you want because you're telling yourself they're not available, they wouldn't be interested in me, they don't exist, it's too hard work to go and find a partner of this caliber. If that's where you're at, DM me, come and work with me. This is exactly what I specialize in. Number 2, feeling like you've met somebody who you somehow need to impress, you somehow need to be a different version of yourself in order to keep that person. That ends up with you pretending to be a slightly different version of yourself, fighting with your girlfriend or your boyfriend because you feel like you're having to be somebody that you're not in order to impress them. And ultimately, you're self-sacrificing. You are actually self-abandoning in those moments where you are trying to be different from who you are. You're not truly trusting that who you are is enough. So this is the second reason. And the third reason is communication. And actually, all 3 of these are really intertwined. Because if we can truly believe that we're enough, then we would actually go for the person that we really desire. We would not date people who don't meet our criteria, don't meet our standards. We would say, thank you, this isn't a match for me, and move on. And you would feel confident to wait for the right type of partner because you would believe that you were worthy of attracting that, worthy of having that, worthy of calling it in and keeping that level of partner. So that's the self-worth piece. Number 2 is also really under the hood about self-worth. It's even if you meet someone who's amazing, even if you meet someone who's like really good looking, exactly what you've been dreaming of, all of the things. If you truly trusted that you were enough for that you were a match for that, then you wouldn't need to put on a mask. You wouldn't need to pretend, I'm this amazing person and I do all these things and, I succeeded here and I'm really bubbly and all the things, when actually maybe your truth is not those things. Maybe your truth is actually, you've probably got some of those qualities, but feeling like you have to enhance who you are, you have to magnify who you are because who you are isn't enough. So again, it comes down to trusting and knowing and doing the self-worth work to know that you are enough and you can call in the high caliber of partner. And when you meet that high caliber of partner, that you're a match for it, that you don't have to somehow be different from who you are. So that's 1 and 2. And then this also threads into number 3, communication, because what I see in these longer term couples, and actually it happens in earlier couples too, but the problems often don't manifest until later in the relationship. Somehow these communication challenges, we all know communication is difficult. It's difficult to have vulnerable conversations. It's difficult to be really deeply authentic and honest and say, I'm scared, I don't feel enough, I feel sad in this moment, I want you to tell me that you love me and I want to hear that more often and I want you to show me that you love me more often, and all of the things that typically are underneath the reason why you might be fighting with your partner or your partner might be fighting with you. It's typically always down to communication, and as a part of communication, love languages. I also want to speak about love languages in this because it's it's the unspoken part of communication. It's still communication, but it's often an unspoken part of it. So I'm going to speak to that as well. And what stops us communicating well to other people is a fear that if we expose our true self, is if we show who we truly are and what we're truly feeling. This is so crucial. Like, if we show what we're truly feeling, I'm scared, I don't feel enough, I feel rejected, I feel abandoned, I feel lost, I feel disconnected, I feel alone. All of these core wounds that we all have. Every single human has these core wounds and core beliefs. But we're so brought up to believe that that makes us unlovable. And if we were to show that to another person, if we were to be so direct and so honest as to actually say, God, in this moment, I feel really alone. Even though you're sat here with me in the room, I've got stories going on in my head that are making me feel really alone, telling me that I'm the only one having this experience. I'm the only one suffering with these emotions. And when we don't feel safe to be vulnerable with our partner, we don't feel safe in ourselves to show those parts of us and still believe that we're lovable, still believe that we're worthy and lovable, even with all of this humanness, this not good enough, this lost, this feeling alone, this feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, that somehow that makes us unattractive, not lovable to the other person. And so we hide it. We say everything except that. And sometimes we attack and blame, or sometimes we retreat and we disappear and we abandon the connection, because the fear is that my needs are not going to be met here. If I truly say what it is I want, if I truly say how I'm feeling and what I desire and what I want and need in this relationship, the fear is that you're going to abandon me. You're going to reject me. You're not going to want me and love me. So we don't say those things. And I actually saw a really good example of this in myself the other day. Actually, it's interesting because it doesn't always show up just in our love relationships. Those of you that are single, this is still highly relevant, because I want you to track yourself, to notice in your friendships, in your work relationships, in your family relationships, and actually particularly your close relationship, like your closest people, I'm going to say brothers and sisters. I don't necessarily mean blood brothers and sisters. I don't necessarily mean family, but the people who you consider to be like your brothers, your sisters, your tribe, your closest loved ones. How much do you really speak your truth with them? How much do you really say, actually, yeah, I feel like shit today. I'm not feeling good today. I'm sad. I feel really sad, really alone, really down. Whatever your thing is, it may not be that. It may be something completely distant. It may be I'm feeling really stressed at work and actually I feel like I've really messed up and I'm scared that I'm a failure. How often are you that honest with the people who are in your life? Because it's this degree of honesty that is required to really make relationships last long term. Because when we don't present this degree of honesty and vulnerability and openness, we start creating masks, stories. And every time we do that, every time we don't reveal our true self for fear that it's going to be rejected, fear it's going to be unwanted or unloved, we push the other person away. And I saw a really good example of this in myself the other day. I was chatting with a mentor of mine, a mentor stroke friend. Like she's been a mentor of mine for many, many years. And as I've grown as an individual and as I've grown as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator, we've become more and more on the same level. And we're now actually more friends than we are mentor-mentee. And we were having a conversation where we were trying to see if we could possibly work together and collaborate. And I wanted it to look a certain way, and she wanted it to look differently. And I'd been very clear. I'd said to her, you know, this is what I'd love us to create. This is what I'm looking for. These are the things that I want. These are my needs. Essentially, these are my needs and desires. And I was hoping that I would get a yes or no answer to that. I was hoping that she would be like, yeah, cool, brilliant, I can do that. You know, done, brilliant. Let's go and co-create this shared collaboration that we're going to bring together. Or I hope that she would sort of be like, actually, no, sorry, that's not going to work for me. I was hoping for a clear answer that would be, you know, decisive and easy, and either I would be wholly accepted, or I would be, you could say rejected, but more to the point, I would know where I would stand. I would know, okay, this isn't available. But actually, I got the middle ground. I really want to work with you. I love you, and I want us to co-create. And I can't meet your needs exactly as you've expressed them. And I noticed, she didn't actually say it that way. What she actually said was, what you're asking for, I can't meet, and this is what I can offer. And what she was offering wasn't really what I wanted. And so in that moment, I felt myself withdrawing energetically, emotionally from the conversation. I felt myself hearing my own narrative saying, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. What I want isn't available here. My needs are not going to get met here. It's just not possible. And the thought that was going through my head was, okay, the conversation is over. Let's end the conversation, because she's stated what she's offering and I've stated what I want, and the two don't match. Now, this happens so often in relationship. This is the crux of what makes a relationship either work or not work, like stay together or break up, is when you have these type of conversations where, hang on, sorry, my feet are tangled in the tripod. 1 second. That's better. Where you're with your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, whoever it is, and they say, hey, this thing in our relationship, it's not really working for me. Like, not the whole relationship, but this bit of our relationship, like, I'm finding difficult, it's crunchy, I don't know, it's causing me to feel pain or discomfort or whatever. And this is a moment where you get to explore, okay, what does that person need? What's feeling difficult for them? What's feeling crunchy? And what do you want? What's available? What can you bring? And where can you meet in the middle? And I'm actually also just remembering my boyfriend and I, my partner and I, had a conversation like this recently. In fact, we're still sort of in the conversation. We've had to shelve it because it can't be immediately resolved. But coming back to this level of communication that I'm describing right here and right now, it's so crucial for making relationships work. And when we can't bring this degree of communication that I'm in the middle of explaining, that it's when relationships break down. So it's about these moments where there's a fear that actually what you want isn't going to be met, isn't available. And you've got some choices in these moments. There's fight and flight responses that are going to come up in you. And actually there's fight, flight, freeze and fawn are like the main four one. But how that looks is you might start to get angry. You might start to fight. You might start to shout and try to shut the other person down because what they're saying feels painful for you to hear. Or you might think, I got to get out of here, like I did with my friend. The thought that went through my mind was, I need to end the conversation because it's clear to me that my needs are not going to be met here. So that was a flight response of, like, almost like I sort of want to run away, like it's too painful to stay in this conversation. And another one could be freeze, where you just like, you know, everything in your body freezes, your mind goes blank. You're like, I can't even find any words to say. And fawning is where you start to people please, bend over backwards, and whatever the other person's saying, like, you just yield to it. You know, you lose your spine, you lose your backbone, you stop fighting for what you want, you stop standing up for what you desire, what your needs are, what you believe in, what you stand for, and you just appease the other person. All of these are like really natural responses, by the way. These are like our stress responses, but we have control over them with practice. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you, oh yeah, it's a breeze. But the way you show up in those conversations determines whether or not your relationship is going to make it long term. Because what I see in relationships that don't make it long term, the reason why the relationships break down is because people don't have these conversations. They stop asking for what they truly want because they believe that it's not available. Or they're like, oh, I've already asked a number of times and, it's not happening. Maybe you need to ask a different way, or maybe you need to ask from your heart and not from your ego. Actually ask from the part of you that's hurting, the part of you that's feeling pain or sadness or rejection or abandonment or fear. When you ask from that part, your painful heart, your wounded heart, you can really be heard. The other person will really hear you, assuming, of course, that you're in a relationship with somebody who does meet your standards. And if you're in a relationship with somebody who, when you speak from your painful heart, they use it against you, or they attack you or blame you or somehow hurt you, you are not in the right relationship. So please love yourself enough to leave. That's something, that's a given right there and right then. Like everything else I'm saying doesn't really apply. If you're in a relationship with somebody who can't love you when you're hurting, that's not a relationship. It's not. So the three things that are the top causes for relationships breaking down are settling. You know if you're settling. You'll be watching this video and there'll be this gut feeling and you'll be like, shit, I'm settling and I know it. You know. I've known when I was settling in relationships before. It's like you so desperately want to make it work because you want to feel loved, you want to have a relationship, you want for, all of the things. But it won't last long term. Don't kid yourself that that's going to last long term, because it won't. So don't settle, number one. Number two, when you do actually find what you're looking for, know that you're worthy of it. And if you find yourself trying to act as though you're worthy of it, trying to somehow not be yourself because you think, oh my God, this person, if I'm not X, Y, and Z, they're going to leave. If I'm not this amazing version of myself, they're not going to want me. Well, let me tell you that your perfect person, the one who's right for you, will want you exactly as you are. And that's not to say you haven't got rough edges that need a bit of work, a bit of TLC. We all have got rough edges. Even though I'd done 16 years worth of work I forget how many years now. No, 16 years now. So 13 years worth of work when I found my partner. I still had rough edges after 13 years worth of deep work, deep healing work. And you don't have to be perfect to get into your perfect relationship. You just have to be self-aware enough to know when you're self-sabotaging or when you're not showing up as your true self. And crucially, be able to communicate it. Now, the way that might look would be, if you've messed up, just owning it, just coming, God, the amount of times in the beginning of my relationship, I had to come to my partner and say, I really screwed up. I'm really sorry. I messed up just then. I wasn't in my integrity. I behaved out of integrity. I got triggered. Whatever the thing was, I withdrew or I attacked. I didn't show up as my best self, and I'm acknowledging that and I'm owning it and I'm working on it. And your ideal person is going to say, thank you. Thank you for owning it and acknowledging it. And I'm willing to hold space for you whilst you work on it. But also they're going to hold you to account. They're not going to let you get away with it. Goodness me, my partner and I nearly broke up 3 times in the first 18 months of our relationship because each of us were holding the other to account in terms of, and this isn't manipulation or threatening. I want to be really clear. This isn't a case of, I'm going to blackmail you to get the result I want, or I'm going to manipulate you, or I'm going to say, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave. This is actually how we uphold our standards. We say, I really want this in a relationship. I think you have the possibility to be that and to provide that and to, meet me in this relationship. And I'm willing to be patient whilst you grow into that. But I also need to let you know that if you decide you're not willing to do the work, or if you decide it's not your truth to step into that, then I really need to think about whether or not this is the right relationship for me. And maybe even go so far as actually then I already know that this won't be the right relationship for me. There were a number of deal breakers that my partner and I had in our first 18 months where it was really hard. And this crux of communication, of how we were showing up, is what got us through, is the reason that we're still together now. And we know now, we have been through so much in our first 3 years together, and we've had so many of these deep and difficult, vulnerable, painful conversations. And I say painful because I don't mean that, it needs to be painful, but it was painful to go to those depths in myself and him go to the depths in his self. And we still do it today when it's necessary. We're in the middle of a conversation. I actually can't even remember now what it's about, but I do remember him saying, this makes me really uncomfortable, and me saying, and I don't know what I can do differently right now. I hear you. I hear how difficult this is for you. I hear how uncomfortable it makes you feel. And I notice that I feel responsible for that and guilty for that. And I also don't think right now that there's something I can do differently that feels true for me. I could do it in a people-pleasing format, but that's never going to work long-term. That's point number 2 of this whole live stream, trying to pretend to be something I'm not. But can I authentically take on my partner's desire and work on myself internally with my therapist? Yes, I have a therapist. I recommend everybody has either a coach or a therapist. And can I shift the pieces in me that are resistant to that, or that are showing up in a way that's causing my partner pain? And these are the conversations, being this open, this vulnerable, this honest, that is absolutely essential to making a relationship work long term. And when I reflect on the relationships that I know of that were together 20 years, 30 years, whatever, and when they broke down, it's because one of these 3 things that I've spoken about in this live stream were not present. And most typically the communication one. But often we don't communicate our truth if number 1 or number 2 are also in play. If we've settled, in which case, if you've settled in a relationship and you're 10 years in, there's not too much of a conversation that's going to change that. And it becomes really, really hard. I wouldn't say it's not recoverable. If you're both willing, if you're both really, really willing, it is recoverable with the right therapist. I'm probably not the right coach or therapist for that. But acknowledging to yourself that, damn, maybe I did settle, and maybe I've chosen to be with somebody who actually doesn't really meet my standards. And then you've got some self-reconciliation to look at. It's, can you forgive yourself? Can you learn to love the person for who they are, even with all of their quirks and all of the pieces that maybe you wouldn't have chosen? Can you work with a therapist to actually try and mine the gold in that relationship? Because if you've managed to get 10 years in, there must be something there. Or number 2, if you are people-pleasing and pretending somehow to be different from who you really are, there comes a point where that's an act, right? You can't keep up that act forever. And please don't, because it's exhausting, absolutely exhausting to try and pretend to be something you're not in a relationship. Relationships should be about you being your true, authentic self, including, all of the bits about you that are, maybe not so savory, the burps and the farts and whatever your bad habits are and all the things. We're all human. We all have these pieces, right? It doesn't make us unlovable. It might mean that we have to have conversations about those with our partner. about, hey, actually, when you do this, it makes me feel, and then you get to be vulnerable about how you feel. But at some point, if you're people pleasing or if you're pretending, at some point it's going to get so exhausting that you're going to have to stop. And then you're going to have to reveal who you truly are. Now, if you spent a number of months or years pretending to be somebody different, for a start, you're deceiving that person. So there's a huge degree of deceit in your relationship. It's never a good start. And secondly, at some point, you're going to have to reveal your true self. And that other person, they may not know that part of you. They may not know who you really are. And it's going to be a lesson for them to learn you, to get to know you. It's almost like you're sort of starting from scratch. And there is a risk. Maybe they won't really like who you truly are, because maybe they like the people-pleasing version of you. But that doesn't mean to say that somebody else won't love and appreciate you for exactly who you are. So it really comes down to self-worth and your willingness to be deeply honest, radically honest with yourself. You don't always need to be radically honest with your partner, but you do need to be radically honest with yourself. And your courage to be vulnerable and to be truly seen, which is that much easier if you actually believe you're a good person and if you believe that you're lovable, which is the whole self-worth work. So I guess what I'm really saying, which wasn't in my intention with this live stream, but you can see how self-worth and self-love is at the crux of all healthy relationships. It's at the crux of upholding your standards. It's at the crux of being courageous enough to be your true, authentic self and to bring that forward without hiding, without people-pleasing, without wearing a mask. And it's at the crux of being able to have those deep, honest, vulnerable conversations where you actually reveal how you feel. Not just, I'm angry, or, it's your fault, you did it all wrong, you made me feel this. No, that's not vulnerable. That's blame. It's, I'm hurting, I'm sad, when you did this, I felt abandoned. So you can definitely say how somebody impacted you, but take the ownership of, when this happened, I feel this or I felt this. And if you would love support to show up in your relationships in this way, choosing a partner who meets your standards, stopping the people pleasing, becoming more authentic, really just being honest with yourself and with others about who you are, what you want, what you desire, and working on your communication in relationship. These are all huge parts of the one-to-one work I do with all of my clients. I've got clients at the moment who are working on all of these areas, and it's such powerful, fundamental work. Really, doing this work can absolutely change your life. It changes your relationship with yourself, which then changes how you show up in your friendships, in your work, with your family, with your children, with your parents, and most importantly, with your partners. Yeah, it's deep work and I love it. I tend to swim at the bottom of the ocean. I'm a Pisces double Scorpio, for those of you who know about astrology and all those things. And it's just my absolute honor and joy to support people to do this work. I've got so many beautiful, amazing clients at the moment who I just love watching them grow. I love seeing them evolve in this way, seeing them love and value themselves, start to build their inner masculine, their inner feminine, their inner mother, their inner father, to parent their inner child, so that they can show up as a more vibrant version of themselves, so that they can love themselves more, feel more worthy, choose a partner of higher standards, stop people pleasing, and have those deep, honest, vulnerable conversations without feeling like you have to run away, freezing, getting really angry, trying to tear the other person down, needing to escape because it all gets overwhelming and feels too much for you. I just love it. I love seeing these beautiful beings transform. And yes, I do mostly work with women, but I also do work with a few men. So regardless of what gender you are, if you're feeling called And if this is your thing for like opening 2024, that you're like, actually, yeah, I really want to work on this, it's really important, then send me a DM. Let's talk about what the support options are that could be good for you. Yeah, I have a couple of openings for January, not many, but I do have space for a couple more people to come and work with me. So send me a DM. I would love to hear from you. And meanwhile, happy solstice, winter solstice. If you're not sure about that, check out my stories. I've mentioned that, and I would love to hear what you are reflecting on, what you're proud of, and what your intentions are for 2024.